Really, the big idea of this series on relationships is this. We tend to treat our relationships kind of like we do our cars. We don't pay attention to them until they're broke. And so, it's not like we're opening the engine and checking it when we don't really have to. It's when the car starts rattling a little bit, then all of a sudden we get concerned. And a lot of times with our relationships, we're not proactive in them. We just begin to respond when all of a sudden something starts rattling a little bit. And all of a sudden our attention gets, it gets our attention and we decide we need to work on it. But by that point, it might be too late. And so we've just been talking about, man, what would it look like to in order to win at relationships before they get to that point? But today, I want to talk about this one right here. I want to talk about commitment. I want to talk about this dial right here. In order to get us going, I want to give a definition real quick of what we're talking about when we talk about commitment in a relationship. And kind of just set the stage so we have some common language here. When we talk about commitment, when I talk about what it means to commit and to develop this bond of commitment, it's this. It's the decision to dedicate, devote, or pledge yourself to a relationship. The decision, so it's a choice you make. We don't sometimes think about commitment like that, but it's a choice you make to dedicate, devote, or pledge yourself to a relationship. Now, that has all sorts of varying degrees. The level of dedication and devotion and pledge and all that obviously looks very different for a coworker versus your spouse. Looks very different for, a neighbor versus your child. But the reality is commitment works at all different areas of our relationships with people, no matter what the relationship is. And this is what we're talking about at the end of the day. And here's why this bond is so important to talk about. Here's why this bond, maybe more than every other bond on here, is so critically important to us getting our heads and our hearts around. And it's this. Commitment is the bond. Out of all of them, commitment is the bond that will pull a relationship through when all the other bonds are depleted. So important. Commitment is the bond that will pull a relationship through when all the other bonds are on empty. And I think there's two really big implications behind what Paul's saying here. Two huge implications for any of us who are interested in strengthening the bonds of commitment in the relationships that matter most to us. The first implication is this. Sometimes the most meaningful relationships require the most work. And I don't know how that strikes you, but my guess is for some of you, that's a little bit of a surprise. And I think that because I talk to you. And I can't tell you how many people I've talked to over the years, particularly couples that I've talked to over the years, and they will say things to me like, I don't know, man, like should marriage really be this hard? Like if we loved each other, should it really be this hard? Like it shouldn't be this hard, right? Like, who said that? Who left you with the idea that loving someone was easy, that loving someone wouldn't take an incredible amount of commitment? No, man, it's hard. Sometimes the most meaningful relationships require the most work. That's why they're meaningful. And the second implication is, from Paul's words here, is this, and this one's a little bit more pressing, so let me just lean in on this one for a second. You don't have to feel love in order to give love. You don't need it, like feeling love is not a prerequisite to acting in love. This is why, again, I'm just being straight up with you, man. I've talked to so many couples over the years, married couples, who will say to me things like, I don't know, man, I feel like we've fallen out of love. And this statement right here, this idea that Paul's bringing up, this is why you can't fall out of love. That's actually not even possible. You can fall out of like, that's different. But you can't fall out of love. You can fall out of like because you just don't like the person anymore. But you can fall out of like and still choose to love someone. Love is not first a feeling. Love is a choice. Love is a demonstrated action on someone else's behalf. And you do not have to like them to love them. We tend to look at relationships. There's two different ways we can look at relationships, particularly the most intimate relationships. We can look at them through two different filters. And these are the filters, consumer or covenant. And I'll talk about marriage here in just a second, but see, it's possible to look at relationships kind of from a consumer lens. And don't overthink that. It's kind of exactly what it means. You know, a consumer is someone who basically says, I need something, you have something I need and something I want, I'm willing to pay a price for that, and so I'll pay, whether that's my time or my energy or whatever it might be. But as soon as you don't provide me with what I need, as soon as I don't get that 5-letter word, happy, as soon as I lose that, as soon as I'm not happy anymore, as soon as whatever it might be, like at that point, I'm out. I bail. I don't go back. So give me what I want, give me what I need, make me feel happy, and that'll determine where this dial goes right here. That's a consumer lens, way of seeing relationships. The other is this kind of weird, odd Bible-y kind of word, but it's such a rich word, is covenant. A covenant relationship and a covenant view of relationship is marked by a promise, by an oath, that exist outside of feelings. It's a kind of relationship that says that this doesn't change based on these other dials. This doesn't change based on my feelings. This is something I've made an oath to. This is something I've committed to. This is something I've promised, and now I'm going to make an investment in. That's a covenant view of relationship. And you understand covenant relationships because you know about covenant relationships and you've seen covenant relationships in action because every single one of you has parents. And many of you have children. And you know that just because your child disobeys you does not, you're not going and driving them 90 miles out into the woods and leaving them there. Now, we laugh about that, but why do you know not to do that? No one had to teach you not to do that. Here's why. Because you intuitively know that a relationship between a parent and a child is a covenant relationship. It's not a consumer relationship. It's not based on feelings. It's based on a promise. It's based on an oath. It's based on something that exists outside of feelings, that this doesn't change just because you were disrespectful. See, what strikes me is this. There's a lot of us that are dating, and we want all of the perks of a covenant relationship without any of the commitment. We want all the perks of a covenant relationship. We just don't want to pledge ourselves to it. We don't want to publicly vow. We don't want to be one, and we like being one this way. That's nice. Really nice. We don't mind being one this way, but legally, socially, economically, before God, we don't go there. And I get it, guys. I got friends who've been down this road. I've talked to a lot of people who've been down this road. I understand. I know all the reasons for choosing, instead of getting married, and choosing to live together and playing house. I got it. I understand. Guys, I'm telling you right now, man, and I'm saying this with a heart full of just absolute love. This is not even like the Bible talking here. This is just research shows this. Every bit of research out there on cohabitation says that there is no benefit to the couple. It does nothing to strengthen their relationship. It does nothing to help them one day in a relationship. In fact, every bit of research about cohabitation says, and I'm sorry, I'm just telling you the truth, it says that it actually can be damaging to a relationship. Why? It's kind of obvious. That right there is a recipe for anxiety. That's a recipe for insecurity. Because the person in a relationship never really knows where they stand. Because this has not been committed. There's been no commitment to them. That's not right. I hope that for some of you, if this is you, I'm just telling you right now, man, I hope God stirs your heart up. And that maybe you would reverse this and say, we got to start doing something God's way here. Because I don't want to live in a relationship that's full of anxiety and insecurity. And let me talk to married people real quick. So When it comes to, this whole idea of commitment from a marriage standpoint, I just think it's so easy. And I've been married 18 years now, and I know this. I'm speaking from personal experience. It is so easy for that consumer mindset to make its way back into our covenant relationships, isn't it? Where all of a sudden we don't feel love, we don't feel happy, we've fallen out of like, that's going to happen, and all of a sudden this begins to shift. You know what's interesting? Longitudinal studies have shown that couples who describe their marriage as unhappy, 2/3 of those couples 5 years later say that their marriage is fine. Do not quit on a bad day. Don't let the vows that you've stated, don't let the vows and the commitment you've made to wane just because you're in a bad season. Hold on. That's what commitment is. Here's how to up your commitment. Real simple. Say it. Tell the person, if there's a relationship, this dial needs to move, tell them you're committed to them. Tell them you don't have to worry about me. Tell them I'm here for you. Tell them I'm committed to you. Just say it. The other way to up your commitment is just to remind yourself. Remind yourself of what you've committed to. Remind yourself. That's the vows kind of hanging in the bedroom, right? That's a reminder to me. Remind yourself of who you are and what you've committed to. Third one is just set mutual goals together. Find something to do together. Set mutual goals. And because you will be running after a goal together, you can't help but begin to raise this one because you're committed to each other to reach that goal. Another one is just go to counseling. For some of you, that might be the level of investment you need to make to raise this one. Jenny and I have had seasons, please hear this. We've had seasons in our marriage where we had to go to marriage counseling. And the reason we went to marriage counseling wasn't because this was not on the board. It wasn't because this was low. The reason we went to marriage counseling is because this was so high. That we're not going to let something keep us from experiencing the fullness of each other. It is an expression of commitment. And some of you guys, let me just say, man, I'm about to get on a soapbox. But I know how it is being a man. And I know sometimes, about talking about feelings and all that kind of stuff. Some of you, man up. For your family, for your wife, for your children. It's time to be courageous. And that might be the step you need to take. The last one is just make a public declaration. That's a way of increasing your commitment, upping your commitment. Just make a public declaration. Talk about your commitment to that person, to other people. For some of you, that might mean you need to start planning a wedding to make a public declaration. And if you do this, if you keep paying attention to this and you do this over and over again, if you stay at this persistently, you keep choosing this, I've seen it, guys. It begins to change the character of our relationships. What I don't want for you to give up on something that 5 years later you may have been able to look back on and said, oh, that was just a season. I don't want you to lose the joy that can come on the other side because you chose this. You can be the kind of person who lives with commitment to the people around them. So give yourself to it. Evaluate your relationships and ask, is there any that need that commitment dial taken up? And choose to commit. You will never regret it. Hope you have a great week. We'll see you next week for week 5 of Winning in Relationships.